Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to see that the movements are coming together. XR, Fridays, and the Gelende, and many others. My name is Esteban. I'm from Argentina. I've had to leave my country for fighting fracking in the region of Vaca Muerta, and which is being done by your companies from Germany and the rest of Europe that have the hypocrisy to do in the rest of the world climate crimes and ecocides that they are not allowed to do here. Germany and the climate debate of the political elite right now has nothing to do with the climate crisis, has nothing to do with the reality of the global south or even of Germany. Germany's emissions in the rest of the world are completely not addressed in this debate. This debate is framed to only look good to you, the electorates, the people that vote for them, to keep them being elected and perpetuating this fraud until the end of our times. There is no future when Germany continues to not address the role of their corporations in the rest of the world, such as fracking and many other operations that they're doing, because the emissions of Germany, just like the rest of Europe, these are imperial powers. These countries conquered most of the world, they colonized most of the world, and they continue to colonize the rest of the world through their companies. Just like the Dutch with the East India companies, they began colonization, the British, the Dutch, they all began colonization using corporations like that, and they continue to do that. The branch of colonialism today is Shell, BP, Wintershall from Germany, which by the way is the biggest oil company in your country, and I'd like to ask you how many of you have ever heard of Wintershall. They have an office here, and they have headquarters in Kassel and in Hamburg. And yet most people in Germany, even in the climate movement, never heard of these climate criminals that are a leading corporation Fracking Argentina, where our children are dying of leukemia because of the contamination of fracking, which most of you are against and know about here. But how can you continue to allow this in the rest of the world? Not only is it killing our people and people of the global south everywhere, but fracking is a leading cause of the climate crisis. Science has shown that fracking is responsible for more than 50% of all increased methane emissions globally from the fossil fuel industry during the last decade, or more than 1/3 of the total increase when you take into account all sources, including biological ones. And yet, your countries which are signing the Paris Agreement, your countries which are signing the Global Methane Pledge with the US, the EU and the US just signed a global methane pledge committing to reducing emissions of methane by 30% by the end of this decade. Then what are they talking about? They are promoting methane increases all over the world by fracking us and then importing the products of this destruction in the form of LNG. Your country is building LNG import terminals in Brunsbüttel and Stade with millions of euros of public funding and subsidies, which by the way the Green Party voted in favor of 2 years ago. So what are we talking about here? This is total hypocrisy. The coalition talks are bullshit. And there is no future for you and no present for us if we allow this to continue. So it's really important, this demo. So I celebrate that we are here today because the climate crisis and the climate fight is not about abstract numbers and data and statistics, of which we have plenty of. But we will get nowhere if we just say fight for 1.5. We all agree that we must fight for 1.5, but there is no 1.5, there is no Paris Agreement when the elephant in the room of the climate crisis is not addressed, which is your multinational companies. Check, who is talking about the multinationals? Have you heard your coalition talks mention multinationals? No. Have you heard COP mention multinationals? No, they are sponsored by them. One of the biggest sponsors of COP is a leading methane emissions culprit, which is called National Grid, is the biggest importer of LNG, frack gas, into the UK. They're sponsoring COP. And 2 days ago, there was a scandalous article published where they found that National Grid is leaking methane in its facilities throughout the United Kingdom. Now, Keep in mind, COP is where the US and the EU are going to announce this famous global methane pledge. So what kind of cognitive dissonance are we talking about? Like, you're talking about reducing emissions, but you're sponsored by one of the biggest culprits of methane increases. You know, the IPCC in the latest report, since many people here like science so much, then listen to the science. The IPCC is calling for urgent methane emissions. Methane is the new CO2 and gas is the new coal. And how come we're not addressing that? Methane is 87 times worse than CO2 in its global warming potential over a 20-year period. And the IPCC has called for urgent and drastic cuts because this is the only way we can avert the worst of the climate crisis. Well, guess what is the leading cause of methane increases? It's fracking. And your companies, BP from England, Shell from the Netherlands, Equinor from Norway, Wintershall from Germany, Total from France, are leading the methane increases of the world. So I really need to say to you that it's enough that we are asking for abstract demands and that we keep doing these dispersed actions all over the place. We are failing. As a climate movement, we are failing. We will get nowhere unless we start debating strategy. And there is no strategy in doing multiple actions all over the place with no concrete goals, with no concrete demands. We're getting nowhere. This is what politicians love. They love to hear fight for 1.5. They love to hear tell the truth because you're asking for nothing. You know what we need to ask? We need Wintershall to leave Vaca Muerta. We need you to stop fracking the rest of the world. We need Europe to stop mining the rest of the global south. And we need to come together. You know, look at your faces here today. It's mostly white people. And yet the BIPOC groups and the Latin American and Global South groups are also fighting for survival fights that need your help. And we need to come together. We need to overcome this cultural and racial abyss that divides us. We need to bring the Global South and the Global North together because this is a global fight. And since this is about international solidarity, one good opportunity is next, the 30th of this month, there will be an action, a demo throughout Germany for the Mayan train, against the Mayan train, which is actually being built by your companies, by Deutsche Bahn. They are doing a mega project in Mexico where they're going to displace indigenous people, violate human rights, destroy jungles, and there's no way that we can allow this to happen. And Global South movements are organizing a solidarity demo throughout Germany. That's a good opportunity for our movements, for your movements to come together and join. Because the only way, you know, the Global North has a lot of power. And here in Europe, we can get arrested, like with Ende Gelände. We did an action in this summer blocking the Nord-Ostsee Canal, the busiest canal in the world with kayaks. We got arrested and there was no consequences. We don't give the idea and we go home after a few hours. There's nowhere else in the world where you can do this. Try doing this in China. Try doing this in Russia or Africa or Latin America. It's impossible. They will torture you. They will disappear you. You will be put in jail. Even in the US, they've made it a felony to block a pipeline. Right now, there is one activist, a water defender, Jessica Resnicek. She was jailed. She was sentenced to 8 years in jail, labeled a terrorist by the law system of the US for defending water and blocking a pipeline. So the privilege that we have, that you have in Europe, especially the white movements, because the BIPOC and the people of color, they suffer a lot of racism from the police. They don't have that privilege. But use this privilege that you have now because the window will close. Because fascism is on the rise and the window of opportunity for these privileged actions with high impact and low risk will be closed and it will be too late. But what you need to do is put that privilege at the service of the people of the Global South that are fighting your companies and don't have the same opportunity to resist because they suffer persecution and death. So if we can combine the people of the front lines, like our case in Argentina, Colombia, and so on, which are fighting your companies at the front lines, with you, with us here in Europe, then we can give meaning to your actions. And your actions can empower and visibilize the invisible fights of the Global South, so at least people are not killed anymore because the government will be afraid of the repercussions in Europe. All I am making is a shout, a plea for us to start thinking strategically and coming together, because if we continue to do demos and more blockades of civil disobedience that have no concrete demands, There's nothing that politicians will be obliged to achieve, and we will just get more tired and tired. The movements, the momentum is dying off, and it's not just because of Corona. People are fucking tired of doing the same thing all over the time with no results. So we need to start thinking and have the humility to think and come together. And also, if you would excuse me, I'm not from here, but if I may say, have the humility to be a little less Eurocentric, to be a little less self-centered. I know that you have ruled the world for the last 500 years, but this is the continent where all the problems came from. The solutions will not come from the same place, I'm sorry to say. You know who has the solutions? The people in the global south, the indigenous peoples that have a different cosmovision, a different way to provide a way forward out of this corrupt and decaying system that we are part of here in Europe. So if you could have the humility to reach out to them, it's difficult. There's language barriers, cultural barriers, and prejudice in both sides. But if we could connect those and bridge those cultures together, and you could have the humility to reach out and maybe conceive for once that maybe the answers are not here. The answers are in the front lines of the global south. They're fighting for survival today. And we can stop the climate crisis one climate criminal at a time. Shell must fall, Wintershall must fall. We can bring them down, and we can bring down their operations, thinking strategically and breaking them up in winnable goals, in winnable milestones. Yeah, they're telling me, and I don't want to go on forever, so thank you very much. Let's just try to keep coming together, keep building global coalitions, because this is the only way that we will win this fight. Thank you.